Welcome back, Scott, for another video. We've talked about many things. Predominantly, it's almost like a setup for a good start. Uh, you want it or not, your psychology needs to be right. And a lot of people come in with the wrong perceptions that they need to take this, they need to take that. And ideally, you just need to have a clear plan about what you're going to do. So that's why we kind of dissected the most popular topics about like fat burners and whatnot, because that's the first thing that people ask. Guys usually will ask like, what can I take to get bigger? I just had conversations this morning. I'm like, what are you taking? You look great. I'm like, I don't take anything. I just train hard, eat very well. Like I've just done my blood test. My blood test is really good. If I want to throw a kitchen sink at myself, I can do that because I'm extremely healthy at the moment. So, but that is only an afterthought. Basics are always in place. Basics being sound nutrition and good training plan, which is what I want to ask you about is training routine, importance of training routine. Do people need to stick to it religiously? Do people need to have a lot of variations in it? Maybe it differs from beginning at the end. I personally have different thoughts than you might have, and you obviously have completely different experience than I do. So, but this is specifically for girls, for women who want to improve their aesthetics. What would be your like number one conversation when you go about training as such to develop physiques they are looking for, which is usually hourglass, so to speak, shape that look great in bikini?
Um, Strength training. I think women need to be lifting weights, specifically heavier weights. And that's not what you typically see. I mean, you can change the shape of the muscle, which will then change the shape of your body by making that muscle bigger and or smaller. And it's going to get bigger from hypertrophy training. And so, like progressive overload or some sort of training that stimulates muscular growth. Um, and I think that is absolutely crucial when it comes to an aesthetic goal, is the type of training they're doing in terms of its stimulus. Maybe not necessarily the exercise selection or whatnot, though that does matter, of course, but the actual stimulus. Women need to be lifting relatively heavy in order to cause the adaptation that we're looking for, change the shape of that muscle, which will, like I said, then in turn change the shape of the physique. Do you want bigger glutes? The only way you're going to get them is by strength training. You're not going to get them by doing banded workouts and lots of cardio and all these things. You're going to get them by lifting heavy weights.
So when you talk about strength training, can you define what that means to you? Because it almost feels like weightlifting with progressive overload, whereas to me it would be strength training is guys that I coach for strength will rarely lift big loads. So let's just clarify that so people understand what you actually mean by strength training. Because a lot of people will go and just do, they have learned how to get tired. That's what
Yeah.
people really have mastered in a gym. And that's exactly why they don't really get anywhere because they always overwork themselves a bit too much.
Mhm.
So can you clarify for somebody who doesn't understand that? Is there a specific kind of rep range? Is there a specific set of exercises for strength training? And does it differ later on when you say, hey, you want to build big loads, you just need to get strong? But we know that some of the power lifters might be extremely strong, but they don't look very big.
Yeah. So it does differ a little bit if you're natural or enhanced. The comment I made 2 minutes ago about you're not going to get bigger glutes trained with bands, that's true for the natural athletes. But if you are an enhanced athlete full of Anavar or Nandrolone or testosterone, whatever your coach is prescribing you, you'll grow in your sleep, let alone train with a band. So that's a bit of a niche scenario. But typically, what I would suggest females look to do, you can actually test the appropriate load. If you really want to get specific to the muscle fibers in your body, we all have a variety of muscle fibers in each muscle, type 1, type 2, type 2X, etc. And the percentage of each muscle fiber is slightly different in everybody, but it's all very, very general. So typically, you don't need to get too fancy with testing, but you could literally test the theoretical percentage of type 1 versus type 2 fibers in a muscle by, lifting a certain amount of weight and then seeing what your rep failure would be at. I've done that a few times, but typically what I would suggest instead is somewhere around 80 to 85% of a 1 rep max is a good place for females to lift, because that not only is adequate stimulus for muscle growth, but it's also adequate stimulus to keep bone mineral density healthy, which is very important later. So you have to be lifting a weight that is heavy enough for you that you're probably repping somewhere in that 6 to 10 range, give or take, maybe 8 to 10, 6 to 8, something around there. That's a very general hypertrophy range, but it's very accurate across the board. And if it's starting to stall or it's not quite giving you the rate of progress you're looking for, you might need to get a little bit more specific, but typically not. But when I say you need to hit that 6 to 10, that's called 8 to 10 reps for, let's call it 6 to 8 reps for strength training. That means that the weight you're using is causing you to stop at that 6 to 8 rep range. It's not because you just decided to stop, it's because you physically had to stop. Otherwise, you're just, doing, I don't know, 60, 70% RMs. You want to be lifting quite heavy for you. Now, I get specific with females because if it's an aesthetic goal, it means we want stimulus in very targeted areas. So when I talk to my clients that are aesthetically driven, when I say, okay, we're going to lift this weight in this rep range, I want them to stop the weight lifting when the technique is about to break down. I don't want 1 rep different. I want 6 reps identical or 7 reps identical. That 8th rep, if that was where your technique started to break down, that's where I kind of want you to stop. It's not true muscular failure, but it's the targeted muscle that we're looking for is failure. And if you start to just deviate from the bar path, you're starting to incorporate more fiber recruitment from other muscles. And we don't necessarily want that because it could change the end goal of the aesthetic look, especially when drugs are involved. So if you're natural, I would say you want to be lifting in that mid to high single digit rep range and progressively trying to get stronger. If you're enhanced, all that kind of goes out the window. So that's where it becomes a little bit, niche for the individual. I work with enhanced and natural athletes, and the training stimulus is a little different for each case.
So somebody, ideally you want to focus on lifting heavy, 6 to 8 reps, but how do they get there? Because a lot of people now are opened up to that they need to start doing some weightlifting, and they are maybe in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, even 70s. They've never done any resistance training whatsoever. Is it a bit too far-fetched to think that maybe they need some kind of, let's say, like a baseline setup to get in there? What I'm asking is probably the question is, how do you standardize what is a sound technique?
What is a what?
What is sound technique for any lifts you are asking them to do? So, because a lot of people will come in and they will be open up to all doing all kind of stuff, and they'll just download some stuff or ask ChatGPT do 4 sets of that and 12 sets of this, and this is like the ChatGPT is just like the worst personal trainer you can get. But
yeah.
So how do you standardize that lifts are good? Because more often than not, I believe people do already what you are telling them to do in their mind. In reality, they're not executed. How do you get over that kind of this distance between counting reps and counting sets to executing good reps and sets that are actually going to trigger muscle hypertrophy and gives that body they desire?
That's a good question. It's for me, it starts with the intake forms. I have quite a few questions that rather in a sneaky way give me some answers. It doesn't say, "Do you have this injury?" Because I don't want any biased opinion. So there'll be a couple obvious questions, say like, "Do you have a back problem?" or something like that. But there's a lot of questions that sort of indirectly point me in a direction that I'm looking for. And so from the basis of their assessment forms, once they filled out, it gives me some insight on what exercises I need to be looking into and what ones I should be avoiding. This is especially common with females, especially common with females that have a job where they're seated most of the day, and especially common with females that have glute growth goals and want to be doing hip thrusts and Romanian deadlifts all day long. Um, so right away, I get an idea anatomically of what they are, how they look, how they function, based on certain questions. Plus, I have either met them in person, ideally, or we've met virtually, which is obviously more common these days. And then I implement the exercise technique, and I will get very specific with modifications to a specific technique if I think it's necessary. And then the clients are asked to film it. I want to see them do the exercise, and they have to keep filming the exercise until I am confident that they're doing it the way I want them to do it. And then from there, it's just a matter of watching progress and adjusting based on real world results.
So it sounds like you are leaning towards consistency. So
Absolutely.
how important is consistency with training? Uh, More often than not, what we see in gyms, people just come in and tag along somebody, as they just do everything all over
Mm-hmm.
the place. And more often than not, maybe I'm just generalizing because that's what I see, but women specifically tend to overdo things because they tend to do an extra class here or extra class there, or if I'm
Yep.
doing legs, booms, and tums 6 times a week and then do 3 CrossFit sessions and then 5 training sessions with weights, I'm gonna get better body, which we know doesn't really work that way. So
Right.
what's happening there? How important is being consistent with laid out plan and not throwing in anything extra too much or taking away.
Consistency with everything in our life is crucial. And when it comes to training, it's just as relevant. Um, a lot of times, what you see is people thinking more is better, like you described. And it's just usually because they're in a hurry to get to their goal. The problem is with females specifically, is oftentimes they're very weight driven, like body weight driven to determine if they're progressing or not, which for an aesthetic goal, that's a terrible marker. It's very relevant in conjunction with other markers, but in itself, in isolation, body weight's not a very good indication of what's going on from a body composition point of view, and a progress point of view. So if I have somebody, and I'm very big on being consistent, every client of mine will say, he says, "Oh, just be consistent. When do I take my blood work?" And I'll give them an answer and say, just make sure it's consistent. When do I check my body weight? Same thing. When do I check my blood pressure? Same. So training is exactly the same scenario. If I have somebody that's randomly changing their training, there's a lot of issues with that. Number one, you're going to think, like from a performance point of view, you're likely to think you're making very good strength progress, strength gains, which you are right away at the beginning because numbers are skyrocketing, but those gains are neurological in the beginning. It's not necessarily a muscular adaptation right off the bat because the body's an adaptive species. It's adapting to this stressful environment, and it does so in a very systemic way. So the first little bit of a training program, those are neurological adaptations before they're actually morphological, and that's a big difference. Um, so we want to stay consistent. You're going to be sore. You're going to feel these things. If you're sore, your body weight's going to be up. We want to ride through all of this noise in the first few weeks of a training cycle and then start to measure actual progress from there. And so sometimes it's a little bit tedious in the beginning, but it's crucial because you actually have to wait for the adaptations that we're looking for to start to show. And that's not going to happen in the first few days, first few weeks, even. On the second hand, if you are constantly changing up your routine, you're constantly changing the stimulus before the adaptation can even occur. And not only is it not giving us any morphological change, it's just constantly a neurological thing, but it's also going to be constantly throwing variables at your body weight. Because if you change your workout here, you change your workout timing, you change your food, you change all these things, your body weight is one of the first things that's going to be altered from the variables. And since oftentimes females are putting so much emphasis on body weight, they're getting false positives all the time. Oh, my scale weight's up. Why? I should eat less or I should do more. Meanwhile, they went from forced strength training exercise. Instead, they decided to do a CrossFit class. And that's the only reason their body weight shot up, because there's just a change in body water, electrolytes, and inflammation. So if there's no routine, you never really know what you're truly measuring when it comes to aesthetics in the beginning. So it's crucial. And then oftentimes you also hear, I'm not sore anymore. It's not working anymore. Well, we don't really want you to be sore. Chasing soreness for an indication of a good workout is not the idea. We want to chase progress. By the time you're not being sore anymore, that's a good sign. That means your body is starting or has adapted to this type of stress. And now the stimulus you're getting is strictly what we're looking for, which is morphological. All the inflammation things have calmed down. The neurological changes have calmed down. Now it's literally stress on the target muscle. It will grow because it needs to, because of the stress. And that's exactly what we're looking for.
How long does it take for people to kind of start acknowledging that the muscle is changing instead of just like I call them just newbie gains, whatever you're exposed to, you're throwing something extra and like, oh, I'm getting really better at this, but are you so you're just getting better because you've never used that kind of
Mm-hmm.
equipment or something. So how long do you usually see that people go from, hey, I'm progressing really fast to, hey, I'm not progressing at all? Am I really doing anything now? Because sooner or later, you talk about strength training being the most beneficial stuff. There is a point of cutoff where you reach your maximum potential of strengths, like you want it or not. So it's not going to happen probably in a year or two or three or even 10.
Probably
But
not.
how different does it feel between first 3 months and 3 years in? Is there still something happening, or do they need to start looking for novel stimulus and look completely different exercises or something like that? Or is it case of just staying motivated, staying consistent, and being acknowledged in a place that emotionally you understand you are working your body, you want it or not, then the changes are not as drastic anymore. But no matter what you do, it's better than doing nothing.
Mm. That's true. Doing something is usually better than nothing for sure. The changes they changed differently for everybody. Like it's hard to say. From a visual point of view, it would depend on how much body fat you're carrying until you can start to see visual changes. Um, but you should notice some strength. You'll notice strength improvements on paper right away. They're neurological. But after a few weeks, that neurological adaptations has kind of done its thing, and now you're going to get into those morphological changes that we talked about. Um, and you should see a relatively steady increase of progress over time. It won't be linear in the sense that every training session thou shall increase their weight or their reps or their sets, but there should be over time an increase in total volume being done, either sets, reps, or load. And I've never seen someone truly plateau. Um, Natural, that is. But I have seen lots of people needing adjustments, depends on the timelines. But most bikini athletes and aesthetically driven females that I'm working with aren't going to get to their true natural genetic potential. They're going to be on drugs long before that happens. Um, and if they aren't, they're going to have a very obviously fit physique. But normally the changes have to happen more so from a compliance point of view, because either the exercises are getting a bit stale in their mind, or we need to change something because depending on how long you've been doing things for, you might need to give certain joints or at least certain bar paths a break just for the joint integrity long term, because there's a wear and tear aspect of these things. But a training block can last anywhere from 8 to 16, 20 weeks. It doesn't have to be 3 weeks deload, 3 weeks deload, 3 weeks deload. That's a very, very specific type of training stimulus where the intensity is probably incredibly high. If you're just training for aesthetics, what I like to do is I like to get through the starting neurological adaptations and then measure progress. And I look at each muscle group as its own entity, and I adjust volume, intensity, load on the muscle groups, not on the entire training program. So if I see certain things are plateauing or starting to regress, not regress, start to slow down, I would make adjustments to that specific either exercise or muscle group. But in general, you don't need to necessarily do a complete overhaul. That's usually a case of a compliance problem where someone's like, okay, I'm getting tired of this. I want something new. But that's not usually when you're pretty serious at this. At the end of the day, if you want bigger glutes, there's certain exercises that are better than others. You can do all the weird variations of that exercise you want. It doesn't really matter. The point is that you're doing the exercise. If the goal is glute development, this is the exercise we've chosen. It's always going to be there or a variation of it because it's the best tool for the job. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to, but understand that it's the best thing. It's like if I have to drive a nail into the wall, a hammer is my best option, but I can drive it in with the butt of a screwdriver or something else, your fucking head. It will work, but it's not really the best tool. So the same thing comes with strength training. There's certain exercises that are better for that muscle than others. But if you don't like it or you can't do it, then you don't. You work around it. So sometimes that has to happen. But from how will you know or how long does it take? It's going to depend on the person. You're going to feel stronger before you're probably going to notice it aesthetically, and your clothes are probably going to start fitting a little differently before you're visually going to see change, unless you're very, very lean.
Do you feel like what you just described, there was one thing that talking about joint integrity is that maybe the level of strength you have might determine how often you change exercises. What I mean by that is if you're really strong on deadlifts and squats, you really put in a lot of pressure on specific joints. Maybe you need
Yeah.
more frequent break from those exercises. Do you see that happening or what's happening there?
Yes, I do, and that's a very good point. Obviously, the stronger you are, the more dangerous you are to yourself. But that's where it lies in the very importance of consistency with everything, including the technique. If I'm lifting 100 pounds, I have a very large error margin before I risk serious injury. If I'm lifting 1,000 pounds, my room for error is very, very tiny. So if you deviate from the theoretical ideal bar path, the heavier the load, the more risk you're under, for sure. The issue that I see mostly with women is the incredibly popular trend of glute development, and the exercise selections that are best for glutes can be quite dangerous on low back. If I take a female that sits most of the day for her job and then throw her under the bar and start saying deadlift, and within a few weeks she's deadlifting her body weight and she's feeling on top of the moon, and her coach is like, yeah, way to go, you're killing it. Realistically, a lot of the connective tissue in her lumbar spine and areas like that are protective, they're not adapting as quickly as muscle. Connective tissue like ligaments and tendons, they don't come for the ride as quickly as skeletal muscle does. So the progress needs to be there, but it shouldn't be looking for leaps and bounds every training session. You have to establish a foundation in everything in life, but especially strength training. If you don't have a strong foundation, you're going to be broken eventually. So that kind of gives pros and cons to the natural and the enhanced, lifestyle. If you're enhanced, you don't need to put the load on your body to the same extent as you should as a natural, because the stimulus is exogenously provided when you're enhanced. You could get away with very common programs you see is like I could write you the bikini prep protocol. I could spit out here in 30 seconds. It's going to be lean protein, green vegetables, and very low to no carbs, fasted cardio with BCAAs and fucking protein pancakes or something like that. And 3 sets of 12, 3 sets of 12, or 4 sets of 12, 4 sets of 12, deadlifts, glute bridges, hip thrusts, la, 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 la. The problem is that 3 sets of 12, 4 sets of 12, all these higher reps in someone not enhanced, the amount of muscular growth you're getting from that is not anywhere near where it could be if you were lifting a little heavier. On the flip side, if you're enhanced, that's the kind of growth you're going to look for, or that's kind of things you're going to look for, because that's going to initiate a lot of growth because of the exogenous chemicals you're using. So it kind of varies there. Now with light loads and high repetition, I don't put the acute stress on the body from a load perspective, but I put more wear and tear into joints. On the flip side, if I do a higher load or high intensity, I have the acute risk, but not as much wear and tear because I'm only doing 4 reps, 5 reps. Theoretically, I like to see girls lifting in that 6 to 8 rep range for aesthetics. So there's always a bit of a pro and a con, no matter what direction you go.
Do you see that, like, let me rephrase you. Men train hard and they tend to damage their muscle quite hard, quite a lot. And they don't recover as quick as women. At least in my world, I've not seen guys recover as quick as women can do. And do you see that because of this, that women are chasing that feeling of being broken, or otherwise they don't feel like they have worked hard enough, when in reality, they might actually hinder their progress by just sticking to the plan and sticking to what's laid out for them, instead of throwing something extra sets or extra exercises just to be super, super, super sore next day, and always trying to get to that feeling when they need to drag themselves out of the gym. Is that a thing? Is that something you observe at all?
I've seen that. I've noticed there's like 2 personality types when I'm working with females in the gym. The one that you have to try to hold them back, and the ones that need a kick in the ass. And it's either or. The ones that you have to hold back, that's the risk. They always think more, 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 more. But we have a very delicate energy balance in females. It's crucial for hormonal health and long-term longevity in terms of bone mineral density and stuff like that. And more is usually not the answer, because if you're doing more, you need to eat more, and that's hard to get females to want to be doing. So it really comes down to the individual. Then there's others that are like, oh, I'm doing all the training, and you look and they're barely doing anything. So it's one or the other, I find, and I literally see it in both, like 50-50 almost. I don't know if it's because they want to feel broken, but I think it's that they just want more because they just have that desire. It's almost like they need to feel the burn, like I guess you said. I don't know if it's to feel broken or if it's just to feel like they trained hard. You don't need to feel like you trained hard. You just need to give the body the stimulus. The body doesn't care how you feel. It just cares about what the environment is in. What are you doing to it? It's going to adapt to that stress. And if you're overdoing it, the body's going to compensate. And eventually, especially if you're remaining as a natural athlete or starting off as a natural athlete, um, if you're overdoing things, your ability to recover is going to hinder, and the body's going to deem what's priority to recover, not you. If it doesn't feel like your muscle is its priority to recover, it's not going to. So if you're in the gym and you're lifting 3 sets of 12, but you're stopping at 12 because you just feel like you should, it's not really necessarily causing a stress to the body to have to worry about adapting to. You're burning energy. you're expending energy, and it kind of factors into the energy equation. But if you're running, doing CrossFit, doing 3 sets of 12 and just stopping because it's 12, or all these things, the stimulus is not what you need. So the adaptation is not going to occur. But what is going to occur is the body's going to realize, hey, I'm in an energy deficit. I have to cut back somewhere else in this physiology. Where do I do it? Let's look from priority of survival to not. What is the first thing that goes? And it'll start compensating, because you can have whatever you want, but you can't have everything. So oftentimes what you see is a lot of females with disrupted menstrual cycles and stuff. And usually that's a good indication that the energy balance is skewed. And oftentimes it's because they're overdoing things. Around here these days now, I'm 46. So the girls or the women in the 40s to early 50s in my area that were at one time very competitive on stage, even, most of them are overweight now. They're overweight, they're struggling because once upon a time they starved themselves, drugged themselves, looked the part, looked lean, got all the attention, got whatever they got, and now they're struggling. And there's a million reasons why. Their joints could be toast, their physiology is chaos, their hormones are all over the map. And what they do is you see a lot of ex fitness competitors now doing high intensity type trainings, F45s, Hyroxy, boot camps, all these things. And that's because they have this mindset that they have to do more and eat less because they're overweight. And they've really dug themselves into a hole, and they think they're doing the right thing, and they're actually just digging down deeper. And they're never going to get out of it unless they realize, hey, I've got an energy balance that's completely skewed. I probably need months, if not years, at a maintenance caloric intake, however that looks. Is it reducing output or increasing input? Something has to give in order for your body to have the opportunity to start to get back to a homeostatic point. Because at the moment, it's completely stressed and in complete turmoil.
It sounds like you're describing the things that's called tracking that needs to be extremely precise. So instead of chasing being beaten up in a gym, chase the progress you're making. It might be lifting heavier weight each training session. It might be feeling better whilst lifting same exact weight as previous week, or feeling more recovered whilst lifting same exact weight as previous week, and so on and so forth. Instead of just going there and beating yourself and thinking that the harder I work, the better results will going to be, which kind of is truth if everything else is improved as well. Your nutrition, your recovery, your sleep, your stress management, and so on and so on and so on. So basically, more important it is to precisely track what you are doing inside and outside of the gym than chasing being absolutely destroyed in a gym or anything else.
100%. Like, I mean, it's true. The harder you work, the more pressure you get, but harder you work doesn't necessarily mean have to be just harder you work in the gym. It could be the harder you work in your overall life, how you're handling things. You actually want to be working smarter. So if you're working hard at working smarter, then it's going to yield to progress. Killing yourself in the gym probably is not the right idea. I see it with most females and pretty much every combat athlete I work with. They're just balls to the wall, working hard, 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 hard. But there's a physiological tipping point that you have to flirt with, but you have to stay beneath to cause an adaptation. You need to get a stress response, and then you need to have the body, give the body adequate time to adapt to that stress response in order to progress. And if you just keep running the gauntlet nonstop, you're going to run something into the ground. Your joints, your psychological profile, or your hormones and your physiology in total. Something will give every time. Has to.
So to round it all up, what we have talked about previous videos and whatnot, understand what you're doing, understand your calories in, calories out, food quality, what supplements work, what don't work, understand all the dangers. And before you're starting to rebuild in your body, have a plan and make sure you actually stick to that plan for, like you said, maybe 16, 20 weeks to see if you're making any progress or not, instead of getting caught into this false belief that you're progressing extremely quick. So now you can do twice as much as you did last week. And then on week 7, 6, 8, now you can't even do what you did on week 1 because you're just overly excited and did not stick to the plan. So key to successful training plan is, again, consistency. And
you need to know the goal.
Yeah. So
the goal has to be clear.
Where you're moving, right?
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome, Scott. Appreciate your time. I'm gonna let you.
My pleasure.
And, I'll see you next video.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.